Welcome to this new how-to. In this how-to, we're going to look at how you can start the engine of the Guimbal helicopter, right? It can be kind of challenging because there are some things which you need to be aware of. As you can see, we're, I would say, located somewhere, I think it is Austria, Switzerland, somewhere really nice. And as you can see, the helicopter looks magnificent, right? So we're, I would say, in front of the of one of the hangars. There should be, I would say, an official helicopter spot here, but when selecting that one, they will put you on the runway, and that's not what we want, right? Because we first need to start the engines. So let's go inside and let's have a look. So overall, right, you can see they also spend a lot of time on the details, right? So the main buttons are here on the center. There are a few on the top, which we will go to by using the checklist. Nice helicopter. There are some hidden buttons which are here, the governor and the starter, which are, I would say, kind of hidden here, but you can see them. And here we've got the fuel valve and some other buttons which we don't really need to use. Then if we zoom into this piece here, we can see the navigation radio, but also the device to set the flight plan. We've got some volume buttons over here for the crew and for the passenger. Of course, here we've got the transponder code which we can use. And then we've got a lot of gauges here, right? So above those buttons, of course. Gauges, a lot, I would say, warning lights. So that's all kind of cool. So let's go insert to the checklist, right? Because that's the recommendation to use the checklist. And then you can use the tick the item once you've, I'd say, checked an item. So flight controls are free. Collective is also free. And then we can go to before the engine, right? So the first thing is make sure that the view is open, right? You can see that this button is over here, right? By default, it's already open. You don't need to do anything for that. Above that, you can see a lot of fuses. Those fuses are there for a reason. And there's the ELT. And let's say it's not described anywhere in this checklist if you need to switch it on. So we're leaving it off. Then we're going to the switches, which are all set to off. As you can see, off means down. There's no, I would say sometimes hard to see, but in this case it means down, so that's good. So we're going to close this button also, and then we're going to check that the carburetor heat is set to auto, which means we need to pop it up one position, because if we pop it up one other, it will go to hot, and that's not what we want. Then I would say, after checking these items off, of course, we need to switch the master to on, and that will start booting up the GTN 650 GXI Garmin, as well as the larger screen here in front of us. As mentioned, here you can see a lot of buttons, right? You can see the map, you can see the terrain, you can see the flight map, but also several other buttons which you can use. In the center, there's the, I would say, information about the aircraft itself, the battery, the outside temperature, the EGT, right, the temperature of the exhaustion, and then we've got the RPMs, the power which we can apply, the carburetor heat, then the oil temperature, of course, oil pressure, fuel pressure, and then the amount of fuel we have here. So that's all kind of good. It says, okay, hey, cross check the temperatures. Well, we cross check them, right? If you highlight them, let's do that. You will see that you need to check all of these temperatures, that they are all the same, and that's the case, right? Then we're gonna check the fuel. Well, the fuel is okay in this case. The governor needs to be switched off. So where is the governor? Well, that's one of the hidden buttons. It's over here. And if it's off, you need to set it like this, because eventually that will also make sure that there's a light illuminated on the dashboard. That's over here, right? So if it's off, then the light should burn. Well, in that case, we need to check it again, right? Because we just switched the box and it doesn't do anything. So let's do it again. And now it's illuminated, although it's pretty hard to see, but it burns. The mixture, we need to go to the top of the helicopter. It needs to be like this, and that's good. And the altimeter, right, you can press the B from Bravo to set it. Another thing you can do is, of course, I would say jingle around with this button, but the B from Bravo, and hey, automatically everything goes, so nothing to worry about anymore. Check it in the box and going to starting the engine. Strobes need to be switched on. All the lights and say are found here, except the light for the cabin itself. That one is found on the top. So we switch it on. Then we're gonna check if the fuel pressure increase if we switch on the fuel pump? Well, as you can see, it's increasing, so that's really good. So checking the boxes again. Injections is needed if needed. For injections, raise the collector to leveler 1/3, then roll the twist grip back and forth 2 to 3 times. So this is a little bit special, right? So what you need to take into account is that the throttle itself is different compared to the collective, right? The throttle is here, but if I increase the throttle on my joystick, then it will increase the collective actually. And the same thing is, I would say, applicable to the keyboard, right? Keep in mind that the keys which are used for increasing the throttle are not used to move this button. It's really to move that collective, right? So we moved it to 1/3 and then says then roll off the twist grip back and forth a few times, right? So we've got, I would say, this one is the collective, right? We removed it, and then we can use this one to move it a few times. Everything works. That's what they mean with injections. Then they say you need to set the throttle to 1 to 15%. Well, set it to a higher value, because what I figured out is if you leave to 0, it will not, I would say, really work correctly. But that's something which I will show you in a few minutes. Then going to the rotor brake, which is over here, needs to be in this position, because else the brake will be applied to the rotors. And then mixture fuel already set. And then we can switch on the magneto as well as the NIC or the engine plasma. And if you switch on the engine plasma, you hear an irritating beep, right, which you can currently hear. And then we can start the engine, right? So you can start the engine. And then you directly hear that electricity comes up and that the HC kicks in if you, of course, enable the assistant to handle the HC. Then, if you keep an eye on the RPMs, you will see that it will start to increase. It might take a little bit of time. If you don't see it increasing too much, then you need to adjust this button, right? You can see that this purple angle will move. You can push it even further, right? It says adjust to 1000. And I think 1000 is hidden behind this button. But for some reason when I did it, other things failed, so I will leave it like this. That's the only reason. So once that's done, right, we can check off this item and we can check off this item, and then warm engine, we don't have a warm engine. And then you can see that the oil pressure is, I would say, switched off. Now, if you move this one in a too low range, you will see that the engine will not, I would say, really start. And you will see the oil pressure will drop, and then you're into, I would say, bananas, because then you have to start from scratch, right? So we're gonna move the collector down and then switch on the alternator, which is over here. And if we move to the outside, right, nothing really, I would say, happens, right? We hear some sounds, but nothing really happens, right? And well, that's weird, right? You would have expected that something would do it. And it's not here. It's not down here. It's really coming from this helicopter. So let's go inside again. Because here comes the thing, right? So the alt light is switched off, which is good. Then the next thing you need to do is you need to enable that clutch, which is over here. As soon as we enable the clutch, keep an eye on those RPMs, because things will happen. So we'll switch it on, move it back. And then you can see the things will start turning. If you set this value to a too low value, then you will see weird things will happen, right? It will simply drop the oil pressure to, I would say, danger zone. And then you might need to make some adjustments. And the reason for this is that what you just saw is that the oil pressure drops, I would say, temporarily when switching on the clutch. So leave it like this and let it warm up. And then once you're happy, right, and once everything is still in the green zones, then you can decrease the throttle slowly, but don't move it too fast, because if you would do that, then things will go wrong. So be aware of that. Also, of course, make sure that you're not in the danger zone, right? So make sure that you're still in the green zones with these values. You will see that it says, okay, low. It will start blinking, right? And then eventually we'll go to a higher value. and even a too high value, because then the high value will blink. If that happens, then simply decrease the throttling a bit and monitor it carefully, because if you move it too fast, it will go into the area where you're not happy with. As you can see, right, I just moved it really only a few bits. So it sometimes requires some time to play with. Of course, what you can also do is map a key, and that's also something I want to show you, right? So before doing that, let me decrease a bit. So what you can do is go to the control options, and inside the control options you select your preferred, I would say, device where you want to control your aircraft with, right? Or in this case the helicopter. Let's select the T60000 and then search for throttle. Because if you search for throttle, you see, okay, hey, if I move the throttle, you will see that, I would say, this one starts blinking, right? Which says throttle axis, right? It's good, right? It's mapped to the throttle axis. So I'd say, why would it be wrong, right? Why would it not work? Because you would expect it would work. But if you scroll down and scroll down further and further and further, you will find the set the helicopter throttle. And if you scroll further down, you will also see increased throttle for the helicopter, right? Those are the buttons which are not assigned to anything. Also, if you go to the keyboard, they're not assigned to anything, because if I search for throttle and go down, you won't see anything assigned here. So I do think, and I'm pretty sure with that this is the reason that the throttle doesn't react, right? Also on the F4 key or F3, if you press them when let's say using a keyboard. So make sure that you either set it manually, like I just did, right, with the mouse, or assign a I would say control to that. So I would say it works perfect. If this light turns into green, then you're good. You can see that I'm, I would say, already a little bit, I would say, maybe too high. So let me decrease it a little bit further. Then you will see it dropping a little bit further, but still in the green zone. So that's good, right? So that's where we aim to be. Here it says engine RPM 2000. Engine RPM 2000. It's much lower, as you can see. It's a 535. That's the RPM. Although I do think that you need to read this RPM, to be honest, which would mean it would need to be in this value. But what I figured out, if you set it too low, then the engine will simply not start and will not work. So if you found out another way, let me know. So once you've done that, you can switch off the plasma ignition off. Then the RPM should drop roughly 300 RPM. So again, be careful with this, because if you switch it off, it will drop 300 RPM, and if it's too low, you're screwed. The same thing is for the magneto drop off, right? So this will drop another 100 RPM. So if you see that the I would say that this one goes too low, then you should, let's say, switch the magneto back on. If you do too late, then you're screwed. So we can do it, we can try it, but on the other hand, we can also keep it on. But just for, I would say, demo purposes, let's switch it off, because then you will see what happens. I'm now switching it off, right? So if you keep an eye on the RPM, in this case, everything still is okay, right? But if you see it dropping off for some reason, where I would say too high values dropping off, then make sure that you're switching it on, because I have been in a situation where it really was doing something weird. So I'm gonna also switch the magneto off. And this is where you see, right? So now it goes into the yellow zone. So be aware that if it's dropping too far, like it currently does, you might need to switch it back on, because else the aircraft or the helicopter will switch off and then you're screwed. Let's look if it stabilizes. I don't think so. I think we're already screwed, to be honest. So we can switch it on again. And sometimes you can fix it by increasing the throttle, but here you can see we're now screwed because the oil pressure is 0, right? Doesn't make any sense in that case. So switching the clutch to off, and then let's see what happens. I do think that in this case we're screwed and you really need to start from scratch. So that's why I actually want to prevent this from happening. So what we could try, of course, is pushing the start button again. It looks like that survived us. Yeah, that was our luck, right? So if it happens, then make sure that you're starting the engines again, because that will likely fix the issue for you. If it does not fix the issue, right, then you've got a different challenge. So let's... Throttle is already set to full, right? So I'm still doubting if it really works, to be honest, because it still is decreasing, right? It's not something which I would really like to see. So keep that in mind, that watch out when switching off both the plasma air RPM and the magneto RPM, right? So the NR should be below 450, which is the case, right? It's roughly now around, well, it's still dropping. And it says, okay, NR should be 530, which is definitely not the case, but I'm going to check it off for now. So eventually, once everything is good, then you can switch the throttle to idle, which means that you completely close it, right? It's completely like this. And then make sure that you're monitoring the aircraft, right? So make sure you're monitoring the aircraft. Make sure that you, let's say, check the lights. Then show this one to you. So make sure that there's no lower bark light, right? So blinking. The lower bark light is over here. So if that one starts to blink, then I would say we're good, right? Because that's what we want. Then at idle, engine RPM and NR must be synchronized, which means that this purple bar, which is shown here, and the white one needs to be 100% in sync, which is the case. And the engine idle stabilization, right? It's now idle, roughly runs around 150 to 149, 148. So I think it's pretty stable for now. And then it's time to switch on the governor, right? So the governor again is hidden in this this one. So we're gonna move this angle. Then we're gonna look at the throttle. And it says increase power, right? So let's do that. Here you see the purple one is now increasing massively. And you need to do that until the NR is in the green angle, right? So if you look at this one, look at this display, the NR needs to be in the green arc, which is the case. So good to know. So checking the boxes. Then go to before takeoff, right? We're gonna make sure that the oil temperature is checked. It's checked, it's still warming up a bit. So we're gonna check the gouges, are they all in the green area? That's the case. And we're gonna make sure that no warning lights on the top are burning. That's also good. And then it's time to take off, right? So apply collective pitch progressively. So you need to do it, say, very soft. And now apply the cyclic, which is, where is it? Here, right in front of us. I've also applied, and then rotation 45 kias. And initial climb speed 50 kias, power as needed, right? So let's see if we can get it flying. Always a challenge, right, with helicopters. So we're gonna apply more throttle. In this case, I'm really doubting if it will start, because I think that the RPM simply have dropped too far. Right, you can also see that the NR is low RPM, which is not good, because it should be in a green zone. And I think it all has to do with that, I would say, button change, which we did here on the top. Switching this one on and off. I can switch that other one on to see if it helps. But in this case, we're screwed, right? We need to really start from scratch because it didn't work. So be aware that you're carefully using these buttons on the top because they will result in an RPM drop, and then eventually if the RPM drops, I would say you're kind of in a screwed state as we currently are. So that's the lessons learned. Here ends this video. I hope you liked it. In this lesson we looked at how to start the engine, or actually how to not start it, right? Because eventually we hit an issue where it really doesn't work. Hope you liked it. If you liked it, then consider use the like button. If you got a hint or tips how to do it differently, then also please post them in the comment box below this video. And if you want to stay up to date about new videos I'm posting, then make sure that you're subscribing to my channel. Thanks for watching and see you next time.